we limit ourselves because, well, we just haven't been exposed to certain things. So if you've only been exposed to a man beating his wife, abusive language, low income, and I know this sounds crazy, you might be led to believe that that's just what life is. And that's a humongous problem.
I don't care what situation you're in. I don't care where you're at in your life right now. You don't have to stay there. You do not have to stay there.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Today for Tomorrow podcast. I think we're going to have a lot of value in this conversation today, but I want to start off with a story, just jumping right into it. So I grew up around a lot of white people. And so, and my background is a little bit different than I believe other people, a lot of people who might be watching this. But there was a lot of value in my experience because I believe it opened my mind to completely different things. By the time I graduated, I had gone to 13 different schools. And back in the day, like in the very beginning of it, that's when like the most of the moving was happening. But I think I spent the most time in a city called Farmington. For those in Michigan, Farmington is a really it's a suburban area. It's really got a lot of greenery, got a lot of trees and all that good stuff. It looks really nice. But we had it was like a melting pot of different students at the school. Like there was an Egyptian in my class. I remember her. There was there was Mediterranean, there was Indian, there was Arabic, there was black, white, mixed. There was everything in my class, but there was a lot of white people. And I had an amazing time while I was in school. And the thing is, so later on, fast forward, I moved to, my parents split and my mom took the kids and ended up in Indiana. And when I ended up in Indiana, I was around a bunch of white people. And I keep saying this because this is what happened when I got there. Now, my family, we don't come from multi-million-dollar homes and, big yachts and all that other stuff. We don't come from that. And so our Christmas is at, an aunt or uncle's house, and we just have a nice little tree. Everybody comes over, there's cars all over the place. And then we have a good time like that. When I got to Indiana, I ended up going to a school where the very next city is where the multimillionaires would live. And this city is where the upper of the middle class would live. And so the students, the kids that I would hang around, my friends, they lived a completely different experience in life than I had ever lived. And so being, in sports and everything, I had my friend group, and then we would be able to hang out with all these people from our school and other schools around the area. And the thing is, we would be going on boats. We would go into mansions. One of my friends, her dad owned he owned some crazy number of Five Guys franchises around the state of Indiana. And so all we did was just pull up to it and we could order whatever we want. It was literally, I wouldn't even say it was a phone call. It was a text message. We pull up to the Five Guys and he said, go ahead and order. And we literally could get anything on the menu and as much of it as we wanted at any point in time. And that was the experience that I was kind of getting, because it was it changed my whole outlook on things, first off. And then two, while I was there, walking into this mansion on a regular old Friday night, or walking into this mansion on a regular Saturday, or someone's parent just saying, hey, you guys want to go on the boat, because there's a boat in the backyard and they live on the water. This was completely different than anything that I had experienced before. And it was absolutely remarkable. In that whole time period, it kind of raised my level of what things were possible in life, because it was never a situation where I thought that because they look different, that it was impossible for me. I thought, wow, I love that standard of living, and I think that is possible because I know all the people who are around this thing. I know how this thing is made happen. And I've never been one of those kids who's like, oh, well, it'd be for them, but it's not for me. So as soon as I stepped into that home, as soon as I ordered what I wanted to order, I believed that this type of lifestyle, this standard of living was possible for me too. And from that point forward, I never had the same level of thoughts. I never had the same level of dreams. I never wanted anything less than that experience. You feel me?
You know what? As you were describing your experience, the first thing, I don't know if you guys have you ever read Rich Dad Poor Dad? That's immediately what it made me think of, where, by you being directly exposed to this upper echelon type of life based on your peer group, it did something to you. It changed your way of thinking. Like, it kind of rewrote some of that mental software.
Just being around different people, period, gives you a different perspective. Because as you was going through that, my whole life, I think about the neighborhood I grew up in. If I would have just stayed in that neighborhood and never went outside that neighborhood and did anything different and not met different people, I would have thought that, hey, the best thing I can do in life is to be like Mr. Brown down the street who has ABCD job. You know what I mean? I've been limited in the possibilities, but by going to a high school that was out of the neighborhood, there was, as you said, we had 100 black students out of 1,900 students that was in the school. Now, mind you, I went to public elementary school, so from K through 8. I'm in the neighborhood. My friends, we all look alike. Our teachers, most of them look like us. And then going and had this, so I can relate what you're saying, Martell, although they wasn't affluent like the group that you dealt with. But it was different. And you learned to the point that we all people. Like, I was talking to my white friend of mine, and I remember being in swim class where they made the black students wash our hair. We had to wash our hair before we got in the pool. And we like, man, they racist. What's going on? Why they making us wash our hair? We getting upset. They don't make the other guys. So I'm talking to a white guy in the locker room, and I'm putting some hair grease in my hair. He said, what you doing? I said, I'm putting grease in my hair. I'm like, don't you put grease in your hair? He's like, no, my hair makes grease. It makes oil. I have to wash my hair to get the oil out. I'm like, what? So, that was a difference. But then I realized the coach was making us wash our hair because the black guys had hair grease in their hair. So they wanted us to wash the grease out of our hair before we got in the pool. So once again, you're understanding the differences, but understanding that, hey, it's a whole nother life out here that I ain't even think about. I need to reconsider, what I want out of life based on the fact of what life got to offer.
Exactly. One thing that I thought was really interesting, going back to it, is they don't think about things the same. I think that was one of the biggest things for me. Like, when you talk to a kid who has only ever known high level living, like they've only ever known being the rich kid, they don't think about certain things the same way. Like, for example, if we go to the store, they're not counting their pennies. They just get what they want. You see it? Like, when certain things come up, like they'll say, oh yeah, no, me and my family, we're going to Egypt for Christmas or Thanksgiving. I guess there's something happening over there. Or we're going to go to London actually during the fall because, it's just nice over there and my dad hasn't been in a while. You hear that kind of stuff. And I'm like, hold up. First off, I ain't never been there. We ain't got no idea of us going there. That's not even a thing on the table. We're going to my aunt's house in Michigan for Thanksgiving, and that's it. We're going to eat food in that house, then we're going to leave there. That's the extent of the travel that we're going to do. And if we do something more than that, we might go to a different state. We're going to go to Disney World, and that might be within the next 3 years, if we're lucky, if we're good this year in school. And so, but like their responses were different, their questions were different, their answers were different. It didn't make it so that I thought like I was spoiled or that I should or envy or be jealous of them, because, when I went home, y'all know who my mom is. everybody listening probably doesn't know who my mom is, but my mom, she has a really great way of level setting your life. she has a really great way of letting you know where you are. And so me, I never had the thought that, one, they were like better than me or anything, or that, and I also I wasn't like disillusioned to believe that I deserved that stuff. But what did happen was I believed that it was possible, and I knew that if I wanted something like that, I was going to have to do things a little bit different, and my ascension was going to have to look really gosh dang good and not common to anybody else that I knew. Like in my direct reference, it could not look like them, because the moral of the story for us is, we could have the family name of Martell Fletcher Ford, because about 80% of the family has worked at Ford. At some level, they have worked at Ford. Actually, my mom's made it the highest, but everybody else was employed by Ford Motor Company. And so that was like the thing. Like my cousins, if I talk to my cousins at, a family event, they're talking about going and getting a Ford job. Like that is school. Why would I go to college? Ford don't need that. And then I'm going to Ford.
Yeah. So because I don't know if we actually introduced the title of today's podcast, but so what you're describing, Martell, is the value of having exposure to different type of lifestyles, right? And if I could just piggyback off of what you're saying, I tell everybody, like, exposure saved my life, like literally, because I'm from Detroit. I'm a native Detroiter, but when I was in, I think, 4th grade, my mom, she ended up getting remarried to my stepfather, who was a Marine from St. Louis, and he's a self-taught computer software engineer. He didn't go to college. This dude was literally like a genius. One of the smartest people I've been around. And since he's a Marine, he believed in we go where the opportunity goes. So I've been living in Detroit my whole life, been in all black schools my whole life. I ended up moving to Virginia, like 3 different cities in Virginia in like maybe 2 years. Not even 2 years, I think like a year and a half. And so I was completely culture shock, because like you were saying, I went from an all black environment to a mostly white suburban environment. Even like their hoods, so-called hoods, was like, it wasn't the same as Detroit. Cause I'm like, this y'all hood, I'm like, it's not like where we from. And so then we end up moving to Colorado, like 3 different places in Colorado. And so I was away from Detroit maybe 4.5 years. And I ended up coming back in 8th grade. And I was right back in all black schools. Like my high school, St. Martin de Porres, it was a very well-known like athletic school. It has a lot of rich history in the city. But it was literally all black. Like it wasn't any white kids in the whole school. And so me having that exposure to other things, like you were saying, I saw a different type of lifestyle. So when I got to college and in the corporate world, I wasn't shell-shocked by some of the dialogue that the other people were speaking with. I was able to blend because I was acclimated at an early age. And so going back to that framework and that title of the value of exposure, I think is invaluable for any kid, any person. And with us having the internet, man, even if you don't have the opportunity to move a bunch of different places, you can use the internet, YouTube, books. That's always been a passport to different places by using your imagination, because you're learning from people that may have been world traveled.
Growing up, my partners didn't go to church. You know what I'm saying? They wasn't thinking about, Christ. So they moved a certain way. And even when I talk about high school, I went to a Catholic high school, which, interesting enough, we had to take religion class freshman and sophomore year. And that kind of was like my introduction into, kind of looking at the Bible, a little bit. It wasn't no deep Bible study, but it kind of opened my mind up. So that exposure made me kind of start to be curious about God in a different way. You know what I'm saying? And so when you talk, it's all types of exposure, I guess, when we talk about it. It's like when I got to the point where I had my big change where I understood God was in my life, that was exposure. I started to get exposed to a whole different group of people in a sense, because I started going to church and doing things a little differently. And even with that, how different churches work, how people in those churches work versus cross denominations, how a white church work, how a black church work versus that. Man, exposure in general is just valuable, because if we just stay in our one little lane in any part of our life, we're gonna miss out on what's possible. That's kind of the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's talk about the issue here. The issue with the lack of exposure. I think, I've run into, again, talking about the conversation with my cousins, the ceiling for what they could do, the ceiling for their potential was to work at the factory. Like, let me get a union job so that people ain't firing me, and let me put in my time so that I can go get something. I can go get something nice because I can afford it, but I will be working at the factory. I'm not thinking about what more I can do. I'm not thinking about what does God say my potential is. I'm just thinking about, I'm not going to need to go to school for a long time. No one's going to need to have to pay for me. That's really the thing. No one's going to need to pay for me to go to school for a long time. I'm not going to need to do X, Y, and Z. I don't need to know these different people. I can just do this because I know that, my mom did it and my dad did it and my uncle did it. So they can probably get me in and I can do it too. And they live nice. They live all right. And so we can have Thanksgiving at my house maybe in a few years. And so, also too, on another side of that, I remember speaking to kids there was one year that I was here, and I went to a school where, culture shock. I went to a school that I describe as the jungle. And there was, now, I don't want to hurt I know somebody gonna leave it.
Don't call no names.
I might get a comment on too, but it was a public school, and there was more people that looked like me there. But the issue was the people there. The mentality at this place was completely different. There was a lot of people at the place that I came from when I was talking about in Indiana. They had it just because they had it. Nobody talked about what brand their shoes or their clothes was. They just had it on. That's just how they lived. If they went to the store to get it, they just want, oh, that looks nice, let's grab that. And it just so happened to be Louis Vuitton. It just so happened to be Jordan. It just so happened to cost $1,000 for a shirt. When I got back here, I went and these people would fight in the hallways on a daily basis because, oh, bro, you ain't even got, what is those? USPA? That's the United Assassin Polo. That's not Ralph. It's not Ralph Lauren. But people would actually get beat up because they had the wrong brand on. But the thing is, I had a friend during this. I had a friend before I got back. When that 2-year gap of me going somewhere else and coming back changed this man completely. I came back and he was a completely different person. But I knew what his house looked like. I knew how his mom lived. I knew that he was raised by a single mother and he had a handful of brothers and they all lived in the same room at the same house. And I also know that they drive a car that was really expensive, but their home was not looking like the car. The picture did not match. But he was one of the biggest people who would come at you if you had the wrong brand on, if your hat wasn't right, if something looked a little shady, if you didn't smell like Old Spice, he was going to be the first one to talk about you.
One thing that, I think kind of what you're describing is, this is something that one of my greatest professors in college, she was an attorney from Flint, Michigan, and she recruited some of her black students, even especially the football players, anybody that she saw potential, and we had to take a legal course, business law, but she made us do mock trial. And it was an invaluable experience, man. Like, I did not want to do it at first. And we ended up becoming like really, really good at it. I mean, we traveled to Yale. We were winning awards at Yale. We went to Ohio State, Notre Dame. We went to a lot of big schools, and we were like going in there prepped and ready. And as we were taking these bus rides, we would just have these conversations because it was a very diverse mixture of individuals that were on my trial team. And what she explained to a group of us from the inner city, because we were like, listen, man, you know, we're from the city. We like talking a certain way. We like dressing a certain way. This is us. This is our identity. We don't want to lose that. And she explained to all of us, she looked us dead in our eyes and she said, listen, what I'm trying to explain to you, this is not a black thing. It's not a white thing, but it's a green thing. It's a language of money. And when you're exposed to money-making environments, you have to be able to speak that language. So what you're describing, Martell, is a lot of us, this is some systemic issues. When you come from a lack of means, it's natural that you want to project an image of success. Like you have to, essentially, because you have to hold on to something because, like you said, a lot of our people, they aren't having core needs satisfied. So we end up, you know, what does everybody see? Like you said, the car, the clothes, the jewelry. You don't take everybody to your house. And so the value system ends up getting flipped where you have all these liabilities that you think are valuable and we're not taught enough to buy assets. But that's the part where a lot of this, it is a big issue in the black culture as far as like, you know, when I was growing up, if you were in the wrong neighborhood, you had some joy, you might have to take your shoes off, put them in your backpack, switch your shoes off, you got to walk home because you might get jumped on the way home for your Jordans. All of this goes back to systemic issues that we face since the beginning of time because in a lot of our households and communities, core needs are not being satisfied. So we start reaching for these different things that we feel that can make us feel richer, even though we actually poor because we're spending all our money.
I think one of the big issues that we have, like when we're talking about this exposure thing is, one, we limited, like Rodney said, we limit ourselves because we just haven't been exposed to certain things. So if you've only been exposed to a man beating his wife and abusive language and low income and all these things and never really having enough, you might, and I know this sounds crazy, you might be led to believe that that's just what life is. And that's a humongous problem.
You will be led. I mean, you will be. That's the problem in our community, though. And I know what you're saying. So the thing is, a lot of times it's not. And I know you're not saying this, but it's not our fault. We can't create the environment that we're exposed to. You know, we're born into certain households. So the reason why I want to bring this up is, for anybody listening, like if you do come from an environment you didn't have the opportunity to travel, like it sounds like all three, I didn't even realize, but all three of us had that early, I call it early exposure. That's another key element because it's different if you go to college and this is your first time in a all white environment or a predominantly white environment versus if you have it at 8, 9, 10, 11 years old because your mind is so sponge-like at an early age. So if you didn't have this early exposure, that's okay. It is what it is. But it's not an excuse just to be content with whatever's going around you. That's when you have to seek mentors that did have the exposure and you have to learn from them. You got to use their exposure lessons to add to your pitch deck.
No matter what situation we might be in or anybody might be in, if you allow God in, he can get you out. And what I mean about that, he can get you out of that mental jail. You know what I'm saying? He can get you out of that constraint. And he can give you everything you need in a way that you appreciate it. And you basically, you get exposure where you need to get exposure. I think about Viola Davis. I don't know if you guys ever heard her story. But man, it was like she lived a poor, beyond poor life. Okay, I mean, you know, her clothes. She didn't have clothes to go to school and all that. And then, but she wasn't exposed to a lot early on, but she got through. So I mean, there's success stories. I guess is what I'm getting at. Is that, and that's what I want to. You know, when we talk to the group that's listening. I don't care what situation you in. I don't care where you at in your life right now. You don't have to stay there. You do not have to stay there.
Definitely. Because you might have started in a situation where you didn't have it, right? I mean, it was, you had no, first off, you didn't get to choose when you were born. Okay. Then you didn't get to choose what your parents did before you were born to know if they were even prepared to have you. You didn't get to choose that. You didn't get to choose the mentality, personality, and what type of environment you were in when you started off. You didn't get to choose any of that. But if you fast forward 20 years, you ain't did nothing, you ain't do nothing different, you don't have any other knowledge or understanding that would allow you to do anything different, I gotta say, big fella, that's on you.
I'm 38 years old, right? And I've been in real estate since 2011, like officially. I've been around it a lot longer than that. I recently got exposed to the commercial development side, right? And so I've been kind of submerging myself in this whole process, which is really like learning a new language on the fly. It's literally like being dropped in like grease and just figure it out. You know, you got to learn how to communicate because it's so different. I went on a bus tour of Black-led multi-million-dollar developments in the city, and I'm talking about 20 million and up, 4 different sites. And even at my age, that exposure is mind-blowing because just like what you said, when you're around the atmosphere and you can see a person, you can touch and feel an actual building that somebody led from the ground up, that comes from a similar background to you, it gives you that little piece of evidence that you need to just, you know what, if they could do it, maybe I could do it too. And so another thing I really want to say to anybody that's watching right now is a part of the rent that we pay for success is we have an obligation to go back and give these younger children the proper exposure. And I'll always say, like, I have personally 4 sons, but it's not about my kids, it's about our kids. And when I say our kids, it's about the community. So even if it's not your biological kid, it's not your niece, your nephew, it doesn't matter because these are all our kids. You know, we come from a time where back in the day, it was always said it takes a village to raise these kids up right. And I really think we need to get back to that. We really need to get back to that because some of these kids really are just going without, man. It's very sad to see what, you know, the conditions that some of these kids are living in.
Man, you hit it in multiple spots, Mike. And I think that village piece is that to the points being made, kids they're in situations where they didn't ask to be in. But even though we might not be right there up close to it, we got opportunities sometimes to help expose those kids to things in the right setting, right? I mean, you know, we doing Men 2.0, doing some mentoring at a school, right? We there. So we putting ourselves in a position where they can see something different maybe than what they see at home. They could see, you know, they could see a man trying to help his community in a way, or maybe, you know, and those conversations give them hope. So it's not a hopeless situation is what I'm getting at, is that we all got something we can do to help expose those who we think are underexposed, and those who are out there got an obligation to go out to seek exposure and understand what's going on out there.
I think it's just incredibly interesting because like we've got like a group of fellas who are all developing themselves, continuously trying to, you know, work on themselves each day, but then also sharpen others. And then we've had conversations about like being a father. Like I'm not a father personally, but I know in that room, there's just been jewels dropped regularly about how to raise a son, like how to, you know, having a daughter, like that whole conversation, getting married, like how you should should date, how you should be with a woman, what should be your goals, what should be your, perspective on the thing. And being in that room exposes you to a completely different kind of thinking if you've been limited to that. Like, you've been limited by your uncles or your mom or your dad, and they don't talk the same language. So in this value of exposure conversation, I just want to ask you guys a question to wrap this thing up. If someone is in a situation where they feel like, I'm in the rat race, I've been going through this. I mean, life is just wake up, go to work, leave work, have dinner, go to sleep, do the same thing the next day. They know that there's other stuff out there, but they don't believe that that's them. What would you say to that individual right there in regard to this conversation?
Man, I laugh because that was me. Okay, so, and COVID in a lot of ways woke me up to some things. You brothers woke me up to, like, hey, I'm thinking a little too narrow. I mean, we just had a call last week where I was talking about what I would like to do in the future. And you guys were challenging me, like, well, what does that mean? What is that? And I was like, it made me realize that, okay, I'm thinking too narrow. So to the point is this, is that my suggestion would be, for one, stop being scared of success. Two, make sure, go talk to some people that's doing some things that you find interesting. You know what I mean? Get around some individuals who are doing something that you might not ever do, and understand how they do it. And then that helps you to see that, man, they're not much different from me. Our skill sets aren't as different as I thought they were. There's no reason why I can't dab in that water myself too, or do something more. You know what I'm saying? That's my thought.
It's power in proximity. Like, it really is. There's no other way to put it. And kind of what Martell was describing and Rodney was touching on. Later today, what we're doing, that session and that group that Martell was describing is called Men 2.0. And it's a group of brothers that we come together every second Saturday of the month right in Ferndale at a co-working space. And we just fellowship with one another. Like, it really is an environment where iron sharpens iron. And every time I leave energized. And so, like what Rodney was saying, you are responsible for putting yourself in the environment that you want to be in. It's not about who you grew up with, because a lot of people, we get attached to these neighborhoods and these areas, but it just so happened your mama knew his mama's mom, and you guys happen to live next to each other. That's not a lifetime obligation to talk to this person every day. You can still love your people, but you have to seek the type of environments that you want to be a part of. Because the thing is, when you put yourself in those deep waters, and it's going to feel a little uncomfortable at first, you got two choices. You either learn how to swim on the fly, or you die. And 9 times out of 10, you're not going to die, because the human mind is so resilient and adaptable. And whatever your mind goes, your body's going to follow. You got to get right here in your mental and your heart first. Because if you really have it in your spirit, like, you know what, I want something different. If you say you want to be an entrepreneur, well, all you talked about entrepreneurship is with people that are committed to working a 9 to 5. You don't really want to be an entrepreneur because you're looking for a reason to say no. And you're putting yourself in an environment where you know they're going to give you multiple reasons. If you really want to be an entrepreneur, you got to put yourself in an environment where people have took that leap and they're actually doing it. They're going to give you a reason to say yes. So me and my sister, we have a little song and dance we go through. And she'll say, I have a situation. I don't know if I want to tell you about it because I know how you're going to answer, this, that, and the third. And I say, listen, before you say another word, I'm going to tell you the truth. So if you don't want me to tell you my honest opinion, then yeah, you're right. You may not want to bring it to me. You may want to call your other friends that's going to give you that yes you need. They're going to sell you exactly what you want to hear. But if you want some truth from my opinion, go ahead.
That's an incredible point. If you like this episode, then I know you're absolutely going to love the one on your screen. So go ahead and click there and we will see you there. Peace.
Peace.